The Crimea is a never-ending fairy tale daydream. A single trip to the Crimea will cure one from their dull everyday routines and become a fabulous rendezvous. Here there's paradise on earth, inspiration, and a fountain of delightful impressions. Time changes its pace here. Nature will tell you by its ethereal face that Crimea was meant to be an illustration of Eden by the Creator. This amazing harmony of landscapes characteristic in the Crimea have blended together in a flowery summer of coastal valleys, miraculous mountains, vast sea expanses, and pastorals of the alpine meadows. In Tarita's delightful image is the sphinxes of the white stone gorges, in the sky-pointing ruins, in the ethereal towns. A rendezvous with Crimea is a special kind of video voyage, for it is only this kind of rendezvous that is mysteriously capable of evoking harmony and the very best feelings in our worn-out souls. Accompanying an eye-capturing visual field of Crimean landscapes from the Tarita, the land of Homer's hills, our passing rendezvous will, like a gentle touch of worldly beauty, open our souls towards poetic melancholy and create fireworks of fantastic feelings with the pacifying pleasure of being present in this fabulous land. The Crimea is remarkably diverse. Deliberately leaving aside northern neighbors with its melancholy plains, let us begin our rendezvous right from the Simferopol train station, where our general and integral perception of the fabulous Crimea will begin. What immediately strikes us most is the victorious Stalinist Empire architectural style of the southern train station. The elegant and graceful Italian plaza, with its traditional southern-style facades, along with the famous clock tower, are what both the local inhabitants and visitors to the peninsula view as the main feature of the Crimean capital. It's this provincial capital that serves as the principal connecting point for most visitors into Crimea. From the train station plaza, the flow of passengers runs the channels of highways, heading for Sudak beaches or Evpatoria sands, but mainly they will go to the southern coast of Crimea. So before we go to the southern coast, let us try to make up for the unfair reputation of the city that first welcomes the numerous visitors by taking a short walk around the Crimean capital, taking aside some time for interesting historical retrospections. Surprisingly, Simferopol, which is undeservedly ignored by the tourist, can boast a history and genealogy which should place it among some of the well-known cities of Europe. Its European looks and casual charm of the capital city seem to float in the air, whereas the yet unseen apparent dignity of the undeservedly ignored principal town of the province doesn't do justice to the city or its residents. The cozy Pushkina Street reminds one of both the Montmartre of Paris and Khreshchatyk of Kiev. The park that lies along the Salgyr River could be taken as a Boulogne forest, or as the green slopes along the Dnieper. The city is located in the valley right in the heart of the peninsula. It was founded in 1784, the year following the annexation of Crimea by the Russian Empire. Its foundation owes to the will of Empress Catherine II and the brave initiatives of her royal subjects, General Suvorov and Prince Potopkin. In the times when the reminiscence of the local ancient history were in fashion, the city was given the prophetic name Simferopol. The memory of that time is forever captured in an obelisk on the site of the first encampment of Russian soldiers in Doroki's army that preceded the city's foundation, and in the bronze monument to General Suvorov. It is noteworthy that this impetuous general had taken a number of brilliant diplomatic moves that caused the fading glory of Akhmeshet, a once important settlement of the Crimean Khanate, adjacent to where Simferopol was then founded. Virtual shadows of the past lie in the banks of the Salgyr River. It is hard to believe that right next to this river, hundreds of years before Akhmeshet and at least 1,000 years before Simferopol, the capital of the royal Scythians was located. It was the capital of those whose bold wagons traveled thousands of leagues from the steppes of Asia to the Danube, and eventually came to the Crimean mountains. These hills we are observing now used to be dominated by a busy capital called Neapolis. Handsome, dark-haired men, the best archers of that time, used to drink their wine and love their women here. The spirit of war and freedom, the glitter of gold in the campaign's actions. The Scythians were eventually defeated by the Goths, whose armies lit a fire to turn the Scythian Golden Age into ashes. There's more to what this city could tell, but we're sorry, Simferopol. It's time we continued our journey. The Crimean capital is left behind. We are heading southwards, following the sun's path, along the mountain valley to the land of mysteries and muses, the dreamland of the divine fairies. This is the way, in fact, a picturesque highway that most of the visiting public follows from Simferopol to the coast. The Crimean scenery grows more and more impressive with each minute and each kilometer southwards. The valley is left behind now, and the mountain pastures are getting closer. Such a transformation in the landscape is the key to Crimea's uniqueness. Tari, Tavrida, Tarika, a special land, a sacred place for one's imagination. Mount Demergy is a local natural wonder, a fairy tale in the mountainous Crimea. The slopes of the hill are an exhibition of natural masterpieces. It took natural genius hundreds and thousands of years, several geological epochs, to create this wonder of the world on the southern side of Mount Demergy. With the hammer of tectonic formations and the clear chisel of falling rain, it carved Ghost Valley and polished it with wind and light. This breathtaking view, right on the top of the mountain, can be seen from the highway, but the best impression with all the known as well as unknown senses can only be gotten during a hiking trip called A Night in Ghost Valley. In the Hollywood spotlight of the southern sunset, the mythical characters Blacksmith and Maria will come alive together with the Gothic prince and the Funa fortress, characters from the story The Captive of the Caucasus. Today I'm going to take a day-long journey to savor beauty, the stone multitude of ghosts encircling me completely. They say Mount Montserrat in Spain has a similar impact. Some people have had a similar experience in Mexico while in Yucatan. But all of that is only similar and will never be the same as what one can see here. To what do we owe this miracle? This sea and valley sliding down to the Gulf, and the city that basks in the sun and enjoys the music of the waves. The mountain could tell a lot, from myths and legends to historic chronicles. According to the memory of time and the truth hidden in the epic, these giants used to serve as a shelter for many tribes. The might of the Funa kept the mountain people from war. Here the namesake of this range glared at night with its chimney forge. The giant rocks do remember the crackle of muskets and the clash of Turkish swords, the whine of bullets and cannonballs, the desperate shouts in foreign tongues of battle cries, with the Russian hooray among them. The Mount of Mount Demerge can boast having seen this event, which makes the Battle of Thermopylae that took the lives of 300 Spartan heroes fade quickly. It was here that while leading his soldiers in a bayonet attack on the Turks, a 28-year-old lieutenant colonel who would later become the famous field marshal Mikhail Golenischev-Kutuzov was severely wounded in the head. The memory of that era, in the times of Ochkov and the conquest of Crimea, still lives on in the names of local places, in the memorial fountains, and the wild rock images of the empress with eyes fixed on Alushta, and in the vineyard valley wide open to welcome the sun and the sea. When observed from the top point, the valley looks like a stone river mouth. In this sacred landscape, one can sense the meaning of the original name of Alushta, formerly Salusta, which in the language of the vanquished Tauric tribe means the mouth of the mountains. Quite a number of people and races emerged and vanished here thousands of years ago, long before Byzantine Alustan was established. This remote region of the Greek world had been inhabited by the descendants of gods and heroes. The word Salusta is the voice of scenery. One can hear it in the lapping of the waves, the gentle rustle of the surf, and the free southern breezes. They say that somewhere here, under the double-headed mountain, the terrestrial parallels come to cross the mythical Alexandrian meridian, making a sacral cross hung high upon Alushta. What makes this plain-looking city special is that it makes one fall in love with it without any visible efforts. This is what happened to Prince Nicholas, heir to the Russian throne, when he met Princess Alexei here, one warm early autumn morning in 1894. As far as the two crowns on the newly adopted emblem of Alushta go, one of them belongs to Justin I, representative of the Byzantine royal dynasty, in whose times the fort Alustan emerged. The other crown belongs to the Russian royal dynasty, the last representative of which fell in love with Alushta and granted city status to this remote, beautiful place of the Greek and Tatar province. The memory of that 1,500-year time span is still preserved in the city's mind. The main keeper of historical artifacts is the city's central hill, where, according to Byzantine chronicles, the Byzantine fort Alustan was founded. Over the next 1,500 years, the fort changed many rulers, names, and purposes. Byzantine Greeks were replaced by the Khazars. The Khazars were replaced by the ingenious Genoese, who later perished from the sharp curved swords of the Turkish Janissaries. The stones of the glorious past were laid in the foundations of new epochs. which finally formed the modern look of the older city that has been absorbed into the historic Pantina. The city began to develop as a resort, owing to the special microclimate of Alushta Valley, which serves as a giant mixing bowl for the airflows from the mountain passes around Mount Chatradog and the slightly salty southern breezes from the sea. This is why Alushta's climate allows miracles to come true. The first miraculous healings took place in the dawn of civilization, in the caves of nearby mountains, and long before the Byzantine Alustan, during the decline of Imperial Rome, when the revered brothers Cosma and Damian, Roman doctors in exile, founded their abode in what is now a local wildlife preserve. There, with their help and natural forces, the blind regained vision and the lame developed an athletic step. From the late 14th century, Alushta began to undergo massive development, with private summer homes, boarding houses, and even resort residential areas being built. Not much has survived from the past times of resort sumptuousness. The Dove, a summer cottage, was built in what was the road then and is the city's main street now. Millionaire Stakyev's home was later made into a summer house for government members, and was then transformed into a youth center. Adjacent to it is the former Divnaya summer home. Today, it's the city's lifeguard station. If you walk further along to the cheerful resort Broadway, Alushta's seafront street, your attention will be captured by the newly rebuilt hotel Crimean Riviera. This was formerly a well-known hotel called Yali Baksha, which means Seafront Park. On the outskirts of the Greek and Tartar Alushta, in Castile Primorsky, which is remote from snowstorms and from Caesar, were the first summer homes that mushroomed there 40 years before Alushta was granted its status as a chief town of the district. This area was later named the Professor's Corner. Professor Golubov and his wife, Nadezhda Suslova, the first Russian female doctor, Professor Golovkinsky, and academician Beketov, owner of the Tayurov gold mines, initiated the building of a modest colony of summer homes. Later on, new homes were built. Here, by the roar of the surf and in the autumn winds, in the rustle of the falling leaves and dripping of the rain, research work was being done, and the descriptions of Crimea were being written. A lot has changed since then. The district has been renamed twice. Most of its original romantic yet modest spirit has been lost. However, one thing is still true. Mount Castile keeps radiating the life-giving inspiration to the city, which is confirmed by the consistently few vacant rooms in the local hotels. Since our itinerary implies heading to Yalta and then going up to Feroce along the coast that's famous for its splendid summer homes, it would be a good idea to take a short trip along the spectacular places in the western extremity of Greater Alushta and along the coastal part between Mount Castile and Mount Ayudag. In geographical studies, this area of the Crimean Côte d'Azur is sometimes referred to as Crimean Italy. It is probably because of the olive groves, especially abundant in Karagba, a former estate of Academian Kepin, researcher of the Tauric Mountains. Or perhaps it is because of the Italian luxury in the evergreen parks of the estates formerly owned by Princess Garagina and one of the descendants of General Rabievsky, a hero of the Napoleonic Wars. The palace keeps staring into the aquamarine's water, like Narcissus, the ancient cape that fell into the sea, a masterpiece by nature. One will see this fabulous view from the top of Cape Platka. The scenery is realistic, though looks slightly varnished. Take a closer look down despite the haze. According to the ancient sailors' maps, Port Almateus used to be here. Thus, the hidden facts of history become meaningful. Virgin is Alma in Phoenician, and in Byzantine it is Tarkinut. The truth is just one step away from the insight. It isn't the bare mountain, Cape Ayudag, but rather the holy mountain, Ayadag. We see the temple of the Tauric Virgin, a marvelous view. This is what Ovid mentioned, and Euripides wrote his verses about. Prophet and master of poetry, Pushkin said in his lines, "I believe there is a terrible temple where the gods thirsty for blood awaited steaming sacrifices. But let the images of the past remain in time. There is no more cult of virgin sacrifices in today's village of Paratinit." Now that we are in Paratinit, let us say goodbye to lovely Alushta with its 75-kilometer-long southern beaches, developing resort hotels, and the best plantations of Massandra, which harmoniously complement Alushta's looks. This is a city of distinguished genealogy, a glorious past, and hopefully not a less wonderful future. The vault of Mount Ayudag, this giant laccolite, protects the eastern border of the famous Yalta resort that extends along the gorgeous coastline from Artek to Feroce. Tarita's beautiful shore, a fairy tale land, a mecca for tourists, welcomes with its Artek. This republic of red ties has recently celebrated its 80th anniversary. One can hardly think of those tents that first welcomed its young holidaymakers in 1925. Artek today is like a small, quaint Disney-like village, a manifestation of a child's dream. Experiences fade and go, but the memories of a visit to Artek, even as a child years ago, will always remain in the heart. This fairy tale of summer and childhood heals one's heart and soul. The festive word Artek will linger in one's memory forever. No one knows whether it's coincidence or not, but Artek is located in the former estate of a well-known Polish nobleman. He traveled here to heal his heart's amorous wounds. This is why he named the estate Kardiotrikon, which translates as heart healing. One should not trust the myth. Each philosopher knows it is time that cures love, not a summer home in Crimea. Its Gulf shores with its cliffs, as well as new friends, assist it. They say that the ghost of Milady, the hero of the Dumas novel, still wanders around here somewhere. That adventurer, famous for having stolen Marie Antoinette's diamonds, was known in Russia as Countess de Gachette. She visited this place during one of her trips, during her declining years. That man of genius Pushkin is often associated with Grozov. It was here, in Duke Armand de Richelieu's summer home, that the poet is said to have spent 3 of the best weeks of his life in Marie Rayevsky's company. The landscape of Grozov won a place in Pushkin's heart. This is why he sent Onegin to the coast of Taurida, the shore of his youth. The land of muses and fairies, the land of poets, where every moment is a wonder. O Grozov, source of inspiration, praised by Pushkin, masters of paintbrush and pen, of different genres and preferences, enslaved by love, created the worlds of their own, the worlds of love and everlasting good. Those worlds are countless, to name a few. Cherry Orchard, the Three Sisters. The waves of this gulf were immortalized by Ivazovsky, Korovin, and Latry. Bass singer Shalapin tested his mighty voice on the rock dominating the bay. His famous song Night, sung in an a cappella under the moonlight and to the arrangement of the rustle of midnight surf, made one local lady lose her reason. A well-known impressionist artist, Jean-Paul Frederick Longo, having visited Grozov, once mentioned that the scenery reminded him of the French Côte d'Azur. It has become commonplace today to compare the Crimean southern coast with the French Riviera, and it is not completely groundless either. If you have ever the chance, you will find that the local sites are as picturesque as in Cannes or Saint-Tropez, and that Yalta is the Russian equivalent to Nice. A rendezvous with Yalta is forestalled by the blooming world of Nikitsky Gardens, and this accounts for the best of Yalta's luxuriant garments. No southern parks can be complete without roses, cypresses, magnolias, and other wonders of vegetation, all that owing to Nikitsky's wondrous gardens. Nikitsky Botanical Gardens was founded by the order of Empress Alexander I as a scientific establishment with the main purpose of adapting exotic plants brought in from other countries with similar climates to the southern coast. The great Russian botanist Christian Stephen and his associate Harvitz established the gardens and imported plants from all over the world that took root there. Having been brought originally from Chile, California, the Atlas Mountains, the Himalayas, the Mediterranean countries, the Near and Middle East, and the Japanese islands. Later on, these evergreen subtropical plants were used to decorate the park lanes of the famous coastal noblemen's estates and the seafront public gardens in the southern cities. Whereas Simferopol is the administrative center of Crimea, Yalta is the capital of entertainment. A Russian Nice, a resort town of Babylon. It may very well be just one of the many pearls in the sea, but where else can one find such a pearl, mounted in the green shell of the crescent-shaped mountains like this one? It was only natural that this shell of Yalta served as a mixing bowl for hereditary noblemen and newly arrived bourgeoisie. The mountain breezes intermixed with those from the sea to be enriched by the divine scents of the evergreen park lanes. The sense of the southern subtropics and the atmosphere of idle flirtations are reflected in the memoirs of Chekhov, Nabokov, Bunin, and Kuprin. It's a relaxing place with its non-stop festival of life and idyllic holiday love affairs. The city owes its existence to Prince Vorontsov. It was by his order that the tiny remote village Yalta was given the status of a chief town of the district. A church was started on Polikor Hill, almost simultaneously with the road, the port, and beautiful European-looking buildings. A lot was changed, enlarged, and redecorated as time went on. In the times of Vorontsov, the port was reconstructed several times, and the seafront was dressed in granite. Only the city's spirit, eager to attract people's attention and impress holidaymakers, remained unchanged. The blues of the bright images of Yalta's resort history is intoxicating. Lit by the glare off the bay, its past comes alive through the images of many splendid summer homes, the time when it originated. The main incentive of Yalta's purposeful development was because of the summer holidays of the Tsars. In the 1860s, Yalta was in fact considered the outskirts of Livadia, where the summer palace of the royal family was. Some of the reflected light of the upper society fell upon that city, making it an attraction for all those who dreamed of entering the circle of the emperor's retainers. It became prestigious to stay in Yalta, and the newly established resort turned into a symbol of the highlight of that time. No matter how long it took to get there and how difficult the journey was, the following growth of the city's popularity was fostered by the development of a high-speed rail system in the southern part of the Russian Empire. It must have been incredibly relieving to escape from the cold and long winter of Moscow or St. Petersburg and dive into a sunny and carefree romantic atmosphere of the southern spring, to shake off the former worries common in the capital and have one's heads in the clouds, at least for a while. The high season usually started at Easter. This was the so-called velvet season. It might have been named so because of the clothes of rich visitors, but it's more likely that the name originates from the velvet books of the Russian nobles that most of the visitors were put into from birth, as a sign of their noble lineage. Things have changed a lot since then, and the former September silk season, or grape season, is now referred to as the velvet season today because of its gentle weather. Those days had a different kind of recreational past. Swimming was not yet in fashion then, but there was much to do. The chansons in public entertainment halls, the smoke of cigars, mountain trips in the company of Tartars to Uchansu Falls. As far as 19th century Yalta goes, it is Chekhov's story, The Lady with the Lapdog. The atmosphere of the past is still preserved in the city's looks. The facades of its hotels, parks, and promenade routes, piers, and sails of the snow-white clouds up in the sky, and some more perhaps if one takes a closer look. of Crimea's glory originates from Count Mikhail Vorontsov. The list of his good deeds never seems to end. It involves well-paved roads, Yalta that was transformed into a prestigious city from a once impoverished village, picturesque parks with subtropical plants especially adapted to the local climate. He made new places of worship for many religions and had a caring attitude about historical objects. New European technologies were implemented in town planning and development and introduced to local winemaking, and of course, his famous entailed estate in Alupka, a palace of unmatched beauty in the center of a carefully designed park. This palace was a visual example of the style to be used in building and the criteria for choosing the best achievements in the art of architecture. Truly an architectural masterpiece, this work by English architect Edward Bloor has been admired by many generations of professional architects, artists, and numerous excursion goers for over 150 years now. Built in an exceptionally expensive, hard, greenish-gray local diabase, and in a graceful romantic style, bringing it in unison with the local scenery of the King of the South coastal mountains, Mount Petri, the palace is a blend of the classic Tudor-style Royal English Palace and the sunny expressiveness of the Spanish-Moorish Alhambra. Unforgettable lions, Venetian and Asian fountains, and the vast expanse of the sea welcome the sun. Following the prince's innate aristocratic taste, the interior is decorated with rare types of wood and fabrics, oriental rugs, fine stone carvings, and stucco moldings. A rich collection of books, etchings, and geographical maps testifies to the education and sophistication of the first developer of Taurida. At the time, the king's governor-general of the newly regained Novorossiysk region. The estate's luxurious multi-level park is an elegant and naturally integral part of the elegant spatial design. It looks quite classical on the southern facade and the lion terrace, but the part that grows up from what was once a road represents a fashionable trend of that time, a picturesque park with some wild elements. They are manifested in the philosophical meditations of the natural stone formations. The soft music of man-made waterfalls, the mirror reflections of the mountains in the clear waters of lakes and ponds, and in the sunny meadows framed with evergreen pine trees. The crown of Mount Petri is a natural acknowledgement of the uniqueness of the local coast, alit with the gems and pearls of royal villas and palaces. The top of Mount Petri was an attractive destination even in imperial times. Tourists usually started climbing up the winding pathway in the company of local Tartar guides, and then the coach would take them up the breathtaking mountain road to the plateau. It is a miraculous experience to breathe in the plateau's intoxicating scent and see the sunrise from behind the sea's horizon. Because of the change in the air density, one will see diffused lights and feel dizzy with the view of nature awakening. Things are much easier nowadays, however. A cable car will take the tourist to the viewing site on top within just 20 minutes, with a drop in heights almost equal to that of Mount Alpetri. The entertainment offered today is not only romantic either. The general style and look of Mount Alpetri is now determined by barbecued meat and local wine. But anyway, seeing Crimea from the top of Mount Alpetri is a dazzling experience. Let us now get back to the palaces designed by the prince's descendants, to Massandra with its remote castle, the famous Alexander's Palace, the Massandra Palace. This sentimental-looking lonely castle on the southeastern slope of the Massandra Hill looks as though it appreciates solitude and wealth as much as its owner, the mighty Russian emperor and peacemaker Alexander III. An excellent complement to the south coastal scenery, the Louis XII-style palace was originally built for Prince Varoslav's son, but due to historical circumstances, the unfinished palace, with its adjacent land, was transferred to a public administration department. In other words, to Alexander III, who reigned at the time. It should be noted that the palace was never actually claimed by either the original or the subsequent owner. The inside rooms were not very large or richly decorated, since they were not intended for formal receptions, but rather for private family recreation so much loved by the emperor. This secluded palace was intended to be used as a romantic shelter for the royal family during mounted trips and hunting. In Soviet times, the palace was included in a list of very important special-purpose government residences. There is little information about its residents of that time, mainly due to their top-secret status. Perhaps the secrecy of the palace in the middle of the forest, not wanted by the royal family, as well as its unavailability to the public until recent times, like any other forbidden fruit, adds to its attractiveness. Visitors who see this rich example of architectural legacy in the House of the Romanovs of Crimea will certainly appreciate its grandeur. It is here in Livadia, the favorite place on earth of the last Russian Tsar, as he put it, where the nostalgic fascination of his love is still alive. The love of his family, which was the most important thing for him, of Taurida, where he dreamed to spend the rest of his days. If he had only known then. What we can see, the dazzling white palace on the sunny lawn built in the style of the Roman emperors, is a building that goes back to the decline of the royal family resort. There used to be other, less spacious palaces built for Alexander II's fatally sick wife, but they burned down. The only remnant of that time is the private church where Princess Alice of Darmstadt, then Crown Prince Nikolai's fiancée, converted into Russian Orthodox. In fact, this palace we can see now was built for her and for the sick heir to the throne. Believe it or not, all this splendor was erected on the site of a previously disassembled palace within just 20 months, a record-breaking achievement even by today's standards. The building project was the Blitz of Nikolai Krasnov, the best architect of the time, who had by then proved his proficiency by designing other projects for the royal family. The grand opening of the new residence took place in September of 1911. The White Palace, which is now a symbol of royal southern coastal architecture, was a favorite place of repose for the last representative of Russia's monarchic house. "I would love never to leave this place," Lavadia's owner Nikolai II often said. Also, he made a comment, half in jest, about his intention to transfer the country's capital to Crimea, and was absolutely serious when asking the intern government to let him settle in Lvadia with his family forever. Unfortunately, his request was denied. Lvadia is often associated with the famous Yalta Conference, which was housed here in February 1945, involving the leaders of the anti-Hitler coalition governments, and the local scenery still remembers some of its episodes. The Swallow's Nest. The Swallow's Nest looks as though it has been built by a giant swallow on the sheer rock Aurora, which is part of Cape Aitador. Its outline reminds one of a medieval castle from the Rhine bank. It was built in 1912 based on a project by architect Sherwood. This airy castle is often used as a symbolic image of Crimea on millions of snapshots and cards from all over the world. In 1927, the miniature castle survived a serious earthquake, but did little harm to the castle. The sounds of guitars and violins were replaced by the quiet of a reading hall after the Revolution. Then the building was considered dangerous to be in, and it was closed to visitors until the late 1960s. It underwent major reconstruction in 1972, and since then has attracted many visitors, not only as an architectural site, but as an Italian restaurant as well. Simiz. This lovely resort village with a history going back to biblical times of the legendary Tarik people embraces the gems of seafront hotels scattered on the shore, dominated by Mount Koshka. In this Garden of Eden, planted with relic tall junipers, some of them thousands of years old, the spicy flavor of the culture seems to be sensed in the air. In the old masonry, remnants of the time of medieval Genoese settlements, one can see native Tarik construction as well as later Turkish buildings and then rebuildings. What makes this place special here is that time can be touched. From the height of the clouds, that is, from the observatory on top of Mount Koshka, a beautiful view of Simiz opens up. The virgin pureness of Simiz, once called a toy model of Europe, can be seen through the layers of time. Maltsov Avenue and the castle-looking former villas are especially eye-catching. In the aquamarine floodlights of the sky, legends will come alive about how this resort got started, and for some reason one comes to believe in the signet ring lost in the sea, the owner of which, having given up on finding his precious piece of jewelry, bought this part of the coast to make up for the loss. This strip of land has become attractive for all those who long for paradise on earth. Well, legends always combine tales and truth. Owing to the efforts of the Maltsov brothers, that remote area on the southern coast with its unique climate and scenery was turned into an ultra-luxurious European resort by the early 19th century. The systematically implemented project of the latest fashion resort won top praise from both architects and landscape designers. It soon began to rival Gersov, who had already been known to the public. Local villas were owned by famous Russian citizens, such as Alexandrov Dolnik, Sobashnikov, and Tretyakov. In Soviet times, these former villas were transformed into highly efficient sanatoriums, specializing in the treatment of tuberculosis. This is the best example of how exceptionally healthy the climate in Simiz is. Its dry, clear, and warm air, with the extracts of flowers and scents from the sea, have a healing effect. It should be noted that the sterile transparency of the local air was what determined the construction of one of the most perfect, at the beginning of the 19th century, telescopes in the world, on the north edge of Mount Koshka. On the celestial map, one can notice some supernova constellations named Koshka, Diva, Simiz, and Katsaveli. The tradition of observing the galaxy that originated in the Simiz Astrophysical Observatory was later developed into newer technologies that were incorporated into the observatory. With the help of radio waves on Mount Koshka, the very first pictures of the dark side of the moon were obtained. Katsaveli also houses a very well-known scientific school for the study of sea storms, which has its own storm platforms and a special surface laboratory for modeling some complex sea storm phenomena. Feroce. The expressiveness of the delightful scenery of Feroce is so strong that its rock formations jut out almost vertically from the clouds and slide down to the shoreline. Crimean pine trees climbing up these rocky walls, some alone, some in pairs, or in groups like rock climbers, are an example of the strength of the local natural spirit that one can't help but admire. The place itself is re-energizing. The Chapel of Feroce stands on a rocky pedestal someplace between the earth and the sky. Compared to the swallow's nest, an architectural symbol of romantic Taurida, this chapel soars into the sky in a spiritual symbol of local paradise. We need to drive closer to see this unique work, undoubtedly done by some of the best Russian builders of the time, and to appreciate the generosity and spirit of its architects and patrons. The Chapel of the Ascension of Christ was sanctified on the bend of the Sevastopol-Yalta Highway in 1892 in memory of the miraculous survival of the royal family in a train crash near Borki in 1888. The temple was built with money from the owner of Feroce estate, Alexander Kutnitsov, a tea trading tycoon. That estate, pompously called Paradise, was later transformed into a resort hotel for government officials and built in the tradition of Soviet resort architecture. A special road ran from the Paradise estate to the chapel called 77 Turns. Some fragments of it can still be seen from the Chapel of Feroce. But the major highway ran from Sevastopol to Yalta. It was the Russian Simplon, as Emperor Nikolai I called it. The road, built on the initiative of Prince Verislav in 1848, was a major facilitator in the development of Turidia's southern coast. It was because of the lack of roads that Empress Catherine the Great could not travel to the southern coast of Crimea and had to stop at Badre Pass. The memorial portal gate had not yet been built, and the crowned mistress of the vast empire, blinking in the bright sunlight she wasn't used to, enjoyed the view of paradise on earth manifested in this newly gained land of hers. This lovely road was built decades later. First coaches and carriages, then private taxis, would take rich and health-seeking visitors to the much-longed-for subtropical coast after a long northern winter, to rest in luxury villas in Alupka, Mishkor, Yalta, and Gurzov of Pushkin. The Chapel of Feroce is the fairest view in the world-famous resort, a favorite place of the kings, general secretaries, and millions of other mortals. Stony pine trees are scattered around craggy rocks here, intermingled among the songs of cicadias and juniper bushes, the scent of sun-heated herbs, and the gentle breeze of the sea. This can't be real. This is an everlasting fairy tale of nature, which has chosen the southern coast as its dwelling place. So let us take a final look at it here, nearby Camp Aya over Lasby Bay, before we proceed with our journey. Sevastopol and its outskirts. Lasby Pass is what divides, or perhaps brings together, the two completely different parts of the Crimea. The bright delights of subtropical paradise are left behind, and we are overlooking a totally unique landscape. The blue-green mountains covered in forest, and valleys facing the sun. These are the outskirts of the legendary city. Gazing at this exceptionally peaceful, even bucolic landscape, it is hard to believe that this land has not only been devastated, but sodden with the blood of our soldiers, as well as that of German infantrymen, and of the French, English, Italian, and Turkish soldiers 100 years before. This is in sad confirmation of the foreign memorials that have been erected here for the 150th anniversary of the Crimean War. On these plains, the British Cavalry Brigade drew their broadswords for the last time to perish in a fire of a fierce battle. And it was here where the Marines, or the Black Death as the enemy named them, shouted their "Stand from under" battle cry before rushing to their attack that they never came back from. The city has twice passed the test of courage and has twice astonished the enemy by the spirit of its defenders. The French used to call it the Russian Troy during the years of the Crimean War, and Field Marshal Manstein, having lost 100,000 soldiers while approaching the city, valued this siege highest among all his best-won victories, and bent his gray head in honor of his sworn enemy, a seaman wearing a striped vest. Most visitors to Sevastopol choose to take a regular bus from Yalta or Simferopol. Some arrive here directly by train from the capitals. But we think it would be more impressive to illuminate ourselves first with a visit to Sevastopol with its view of the sea, for it is the sea that Sevastopol considers its mother. This is why we will take a ferry across Sevastopol's main bay, Severnaya Bukhta, Northern Bay, to marvel at the unmatched sea-facing facade of the White City. Founded in the times of Catherine in 1783 as the main naval base for the Black Sea Fleet, and given the prophetic name of Sevastopol, which means city of glory, worthy of awe. The city's further history has proved its right to bear this valorous name. The city is one that has seen hundreds of heroes: Ushakov, Lazarev, Kornilov, and Nakimov, Koshka the seaman, and Dasha of Sevastopol. The city faces the sea, the beautiful blue bays, and the roadsteads. The architecture bears some natural-looking naval features. The terraces of seafront streets remind one of ship's decks. The city's steep stairs look like ship's ladders. The city's white outfit is identical to the full uniform of the Black Sea Fleet seamen. After the storm of fire, having cured your wounds, you are dressed in your full uniform, the white stone from Inkerman. Old ravelings from the coastal batteries, so characteristic of the marine fortresses, guard the Blue Bay waters where the ships are harbored. All those, 100 cannon frigates, glorious brigs, and corvettes are long gone now, but in the times of Ushakov, they used to dominate all of Europe's southern seas. The glare from the waves today, like 200 years ago, illuminates the hero's waterway from beneath. The brig Mercury, which Captain Karaski was in command of, arrived back in Sevastopol with sails shot through and hull pierced, but on its own. It was incredible, but the brig, having only 18 cannons on board, engaged 2 Turkish frigates in battle, whose total weapon power was over 148 cannons, and won the day. If you have the time, you must visit the Midshipmen's Boulevard, with the very first monument to the hero city, a victorious Roman boat on top of the granite pedestal with a laconic inscription on it, the wording of which is believed to have been suggested by the Tsar to Kazarsky as a model of posterity. The hero's city emblem is a monument to the sunken ships that used to horrify the Turkish fleet. Their brave captains, Nakimov, Kornilov, and Istomin, were in charge of the defense of the Russian Troy, and the dismounted cannons, together with the crews, fought on the bastions of the city when besieged by the Anglo-French troops. The ships were scuttled to block the entrance to Sevastopol's inner harbor with their mast, hulls, and spars. One of the main heroes of the first siege of the city was Admiral Nakamoto. His brilliant victory in the Battle of Sinop in 1853 was his last contribution to the glorious history of the sailing fleet of Imperial Russia. It wasn't his fault that sailing frigates and battleships were destined to be replaced by the ships of steel that had already appeared in industrial Europe. One of the bravest men of his time, Nakamoto fought for the glory of Russia and died in the battle defending the fortress of Malakov. Grafskaya Landing is what the city started from. Together with the ships of wood construction, through the bad times of metropolitan destruction, which all resulted in its rebirth from ashes like a phoenix, each time emerging more beautiful without regrets. Its boulevards, lanes, and graceful antiquated avenues stir a sense of pride. Suffice it to say, one of the sketches about the siege of Sevastopol by Leo Tolstoy, then an army officer whose artillery battery actively fought on Russia's place of execution, Bastillion 4, wrote, "It can't be that with the thought that you are in Sevastopol too, a sense of courage would not penetrate more into your soul, and blood would not course faster in your veins. Perhaps this feeling will be the same for you too." The city of Sevastopol radiates a very special aura of lofty feelings. Such powerful energy must account for the location of this grand city of worth. Most parts of Sevastopol lie within a triangle, with some of the oldest centers of civilization on its vertexes: Khersones, Intermin, Balaklava. Khersones of the Tarik. This unique survival of Greek, Roman, and Byzantine architecture is located 3 miles west of the city of Sevastopol. The ruins of the city, founded by Greeks and then incorporated into the Byzantine Empire, have been proclaimed as having outstanding universal value. Along with the Egyptian pyramids, the Colosseum in Rome, and the Parthenon in Athens, this site is part of UNESCO's World Heritage List. All that we can see now, the city's residential areas, fortifications, temples, mosaics, amphitheater, is the result of hard work from many generations of researchers. We are 2,500 years apart from the time of the first Greek colonists who founded their independent polis on the shore of this rocky peninsula. The word Chersonese translates as peninsula. Its Tauric meaning is the geographical coordinates of a farthest point in the Okomena, the Greek world, and of the legendary land of the Taurians, believed to be inhabited by barbarians, cyclopses, fire-breathing bulls, Amazons, and other mythical figures. Learning more historical details of this remarkable city where Prince Vladimir converted into Christianity requires a longer visit. All we can provide now is a short rendezvous with Chersonese. Balaclava. One can hardly find a place in Crimea to match Balaclava. With its marvelous quiet harbor framed by green rocks, a fantastic history that goes back to the times of Odysseus, fine weather, and invigorating light wine. It was a favorite city of Kuprin, English nobles, Genoese consuls, and Roman centurions. The name of the city, that recently celebrated its 2,500-year anniversary, sounds gentle due to the harmonious combination of its soft sounds. Romans called this place Harbor of Symbion, which became Yambol under Byzantine Greeks and Ciambalo under Genoese rule. The city's modern name might resound an echo from its Turkish times, Balik meaning fish, and lava meaning much. In Soviet times, Balaclava was a top-secret base. Today, this pearl of the Crimea is open to the general public and has become one of the favorite tourist attractions. For many, this word, like Massandra, is associated with the famous brand name of top-quality wines. This is true, as well as the fact that here in the hinterland around Sevastopol, near Northern Bay and farther down the valley, the first vineyards were established in the time of Chersonese, which cultivated this land as its main agricultural supply. The Romans also used the local stone pit where captive slaves and Christian prisoners mined white building stone from the caves. According to the chronicle, St. Clementine, the second pope, suffered martyrdom here in the 1st century AD. 600 years later, another pope, Martin I, banished here in the Crimea, preached sermons to the faithful until his death. The memory of these canonized Christian bishops are preserved in the churches of the old St. Clementine Monastery. Inkerman is not just strikingly beautiful as a background to these kingdoms that crumbled into dust. Its scenery is as valuable as Crimean antiquities. The medieval fortress of Kalamita, on the edge of the plateau, is like the peak of an iceberg, from an age long ago dissolved in the local landscape. Ancient stone pits are not at all the beginning of local history here. The area has several sites. In Uchbash, of the Tauric settlements, those violent descendants of the Samarians who used to terrify the seafarers in the times of Odysseus. ancient Greeks in the times of Chersonesus, and the Romans in the time of the empire's Golden Age. Saki. As the landscape images fly by, our itinerary leads us to the northwestern part of the Crimea. This oldest of Crimean spa towns is located on the western coast, 5 kilometers from the Black Sea shore, 45 kilometers from Simferopol, and 20 kilometers from Yevpatoria. In Saki, the cool breeze of the sea and the heated air flowing from the steppe make a delightful blend of scented air, combined with the smell of wild-growing flowers and herbs. Saki is a life-saving town of hope, which is known for its healing muds and spas. The Greek historian Herodotus mentions the land of Taurica with a saline lake rich in healing muds, where people used the Egyptian method of treating disorders, by applying the mud all over the patient's body, leaving it to dry in the sun, and then washing it away with the water from the lake. The fame of the Saki Lake and its invigorating power quickly spread all over Russia. With just 29 patients in the late 1800s, the town welcomed almost 5,000 visitors in 1917. The town also saw Roosevelt and Churchill on their way to the Yalta Conference in 1945. Historians still find it hard to answer the question of when the first human settlement appeared on the site of what is now the town of Saki. In the time of the Khanate of the Crimea, Saki was a small village and part of the domain of a famous Crimean clan called Mansour. But the town's name is not of an ancient origin. It only goes back to the time of Catherine II. Monuments to Lisa Ukraina and N. Gogoil witness the fact they underwent treatment in Saki. Yevpatoria. Austere landscapes of the endless plains blending into the sea are vividly decorated around Yevpatoria on Calumet Bay. The city occupies a privileged position among many existing resorts due to its magnificent sandy beaches, sunny weather, and abundant local fruit and vegetables. Another factor that makes Yevpatoria special is that it is so much different from the luxury and chic of the resorts on the southern coast. Founded in the 6th century BC as a Greek colony and later renamed for Mithridates VI Eupator, 6th king of Pontus, the city has known many masters, passing to Russia with the annexation of the Crimea in 1783. Nomadic people, the Huns, Khazars, Bulgars, and Pechenegs that came and went throughout history left their burial molds with giant stone images on them. The attractiveness of Yevpatoria lies in its spa resorts, based on mineral springs and healing muds, and in the charm of the tranquility of the city's atmosphere, with Karaite synagogues, Turkish mosques, and Russian Orthodox churches standing peacefully next to one another, and particular-looking electric streetcars, so uncommon for a 21st century city. It's no accident that one poet said he was sorry for those who had never visited Yevpatoria. Cape Tarkinut. And here we are heading westward again to meet Cape Tarkinut. Lake Danuzlav is on our way to the shore. The lake is 28 meters deep, which makes it Crimea's deepest lake. But what is interesting about it is that its water is salty in the south and fresh in the north. We are going to drive through Chernymorskoye village, a district center which borders the Tarkinut Peninsula. The village is located on convenient Uskaya Bay, part of the larger Tarkinut Bay. The village is multinational and has a long history. Its first civilized inhabitants were Samarians, later replaced by the Greeks, who founded their colony, Kalos Liman, here, which was under the domain of Chersonese. A local museum houses a display of some unique archaeological findings, among which there is a terracotta image of Demeter, goddess of agriculture and fertility. This is just one of 3 surviving molded images of Demeter. A massive landslide took place on the shore between Chernymorskoye and Tarkinut in the summer of 1933. A huge limestone block, 500 meters long, 200 meters wide, and 35 meters tall, slid down to the sea, carving the stony shoreline like a giant knife. Those slices, stretched for hundreds of meters, have also slid and sunk into the sea, thus turning into islets, Such a chaotic mass of rock is impressive in its grandeur. The shapes of the rocks are so quaint and unusual, with lots of niches and cells in them, like a local ghost valley. The lighthouse beam here can be seen from 17 miles away. This is the farthest western point of Cape Tarkinut, often called Cape of Storms or Cape Devil because of the hazardous navigation dangers around it. Quaint-looking pillars of stone that are abundant in Alechcha and Jangula parts are found near the shores of Cape Tarkinut. Grottos, niches, and tunnels add to the local air of mystery. Halfway between Cape Tarkinut and Cape Uret, some magnificent teeny bays can be found with miniature sand or pebble beaches. But we have to leave this dreamland to get back to the route, which will take us to the center of Crimea, the formal capital of the Crimean Khans, Bakhchisarai. Bakhchisarai. If envisioned as a living creature, Crimea would have its heart in or near Bakhchisarai. Few places in Crimea could rival romantic landscapes found in the vicinity around Bakhchisarai. It seems like this area was intended as an oasis, a cradle for the humans to spring forth into the world later on. Local primitive tribes at the dawn of civilization who lived here had enough grottos and wild animals and cliffs that were good for ambushing their prey. For many centuries, this land was inhabited by many different nations, including the Taurians, Scythians, Goths, and the Alani. After 3 centuries, from the 16th century AD until the abolition of the Crimean Khanate, the capital was at Krim-Garai Khans. The palace, Khansarai, where many people's fates were decided, was built with the efforts of different architects, including Italians, Turks, and Greeks. Each of them contributed to the outside looks, the design, and the decor of the palace, which together created a Crimean Tatar architectural style, a Turkish Baroque. The palace, like the city, recently celebrated its 500th anniversary. It went through several reconstructions and was restored after fires. The latest restoration, to a certain extent, has brought it back to its original look. The courtyard was first designed as a parade ground where the Khan addressed his loyal military elite before a campaign. The directions of the raids were often determined by the Turkish sultans. Another example of Turkish influence was the Khan's chancellery and bodyguards. These premises are founded near the entrance gate, where Khan Jami, the Khan's mosque, is found. The mosque was used for Friday prayers. Friday is the holy day for Orthodox Muslims. bit further, the Khan's Mezarlik is located that encloses the graveyard and two mausoleums. Inside the quiet tomb of Krim-Garai Khan, the great descendant of Genghis Khan, lies with a calligraphic Arabic epitaph running on top of the coffin. God is eternal, war his craft. This was a man who made people and nations tremble with terror and commanded a stone to cry in loving memory of his wife. Who was she? A Circassian girl? A girl from Russia? Or from Ukraine? Pushkin believed she was a girl from Poland, perhaps because he himself had not escaped from the spell of a Polish girl. He then wrote a poem which made the city in the White Gorge famous forever. The palace also remembers Suvorov and Catherine, the harems and the falcons, and the murmur of the brooks and the fountains. Let us take a final glimpse of the romantic face of Bakhchisarai and move on. Upensky Monastery and Chufut Calais. We are now walking up a narrow path that runs along the bottom of the sphinx-like mountain gorge, leaving the old mosque behind and marveling at the countless remains of the past. This is what constitutes the wonder of the Crimea, the surprising variety of independent cultures all within one peninsula. Bakhchisarai has plenty of historically interesting sites illustrating this harmony of history and nature that is so characteristic of Crimea. Thus, the deep bed of the formerly tectonic valley Maram Dari, with its scant vegetation on its chalky white slopes, keeps the memories of many times and nations from this prehistoric era. Surprisingly, this beautiful valley shelters places of worship of different religions as well. In the beginning of the gorge, there is a Muslim sanctuary, which includes the mausoleum of the founders of the Crimean Khanate, the legendary Haji Gari and his son Devlet Gari. And Zinjeli Medris, the very first Muslim religious college nearby. As we walk up the path, one can't help but notice groups of obviously man-made caves along the empty eye sockets on the chalky sides of the gorge. Cave towns Eski Kerman, Chufut Calais, Mangup Calais, Kiz Kerman, Bakla, feudal castles of Tepi Kermen, Suryen's fortress, and cave monasteries of Kachi Kalyon, Chilter, Shudan, are so numerous that a special branch in archaeology was invented, dedicated to the study of cave architecture. The place of worship in this part of the valley is Sviato-Upensky Cave Monastery, and its general looks are sure to impress any visitor. The image of a monastery rock with the staircase carved in stone that leads to the churches above, once seen, can never be forgotten. According to historical chronicles of Crimean Middle Ages, the monastery dates back to Byzantine times. During a 1,000-year history, it has survived periods of prosperity, decline, revival, oblivion, and present-day reinvention. Here, it is possible to touch ethereal time, and with a drink of fresh water from the holy spring, sense the revitalizing aura of the sacred place. Walking forward along the path, which mostly runs along the roadway that existed here centuries ago, we are approaching a lovely meadow from which there opens up a fantastic view from classical biblical tales. A heavenly city soaring in the air. The ruins of this abandoned city, with the strange name Chafut Calais, or Jewish fortress, are one of the numerous riddles of Crimean history. Byzantine sources report a city perched on top of a hill by the name of Fuli at least 1,500 years ago. Chafut Calais might be identified with it. Then there was a fortress called Kurik York, which housed the first capital of the Crimean Khanate. That town was finally abandoned more than 200 years ago. And the town was deserted, and there only remained the ruins of towers here and there, the caves carved in rock, fragments of stone, ashes, and dust. The last bend on the winding path, the remains of the fortress wall with a secret door in it, the cool passage of the doorway, tiers of defensive caves. The remains of the streets, pavements, the tracks of the forged wheels. Karaite synagogues where the scrolls of the Torah were read. The cuneiform of Jewish epitaphs. Queen Janique Mausoleum. The remnants of the once powerful wall Orta Kapu, and the breathtaking view from the northern steppe. In conclusion of part 1 of our filmed Rendezvous with Crimea, we would like to offer you a video with the well-known title, Grand Canyon. This is a classic route for hiking trips offered to visitors, which includes a wonderful prescription of landscape therapy in one of the best-known areas of the mountainous Crimea. A light walk along the bottom of the deep tectonic crack that runs near the northern side of the famous Mount Petrie, the scent of the forest, re-energizing springs, and the bathtub of youth, which relieves the stress accumulated for years with each dip, is just to name a few of the delights on the long list. Giant cliffs, steep ridges, and bushy rocks. The bottom of the gorge was carved well by the water. The tremendous work the water has done is clear from the numerous blocks of stone, piled boulders, and waterfalls. The limestone river bed has been polished with stone balls that have formed tanks and bathtubs. Years later, these images might pop up in your mind and make you feel like taking another journey. Let it be. As Postovsky once put it, I travel, therefore I am. Among some of the outstanding beauty in Crimean landscapes, there are wide crescents of bays that are carved into the frame of gray hills, which are especially abundant in the eastern Crimea. No paintbrush can put them on paper, nor can they be verbalized. M. Voloshin. Perhaps it is somewhere here, where the magnificent hills blended into the brocade sea, that the golden feather of a mythical bird can be found, and miracles can happen. Eastern Crimea is a land of poets and the shore of an ocean of history. From Sumerian beginnings and up until today, the waves have been casting upon the shore fragments of Hellenic rowing boats, Scythian earrings, coins dating to the time of the Roman Emperor Justinian, and rusty helmets and bayonets, memory of the landing operations of World War II. It is unlikely that Yalta, which keeps indulging in the sun, and its status as a famous resort town, as well as the rest of the Crimean ecstatic paradise, with its smell of evergreen endemic vegetation mixed with the tourist sweat and permeated throughout all of the southern coast. This very special part of Crimea has for decades borne the name of Land of Samaria, a name coined by Voloshin. It starts from the eastern coast of Alushta, with its coastal valleys and chained hills, running up to the city of Kerch, the route we are about to follow. To the east of Alushta, the geographical doorkeeper of paradise, the coastal scenery gains more light and space. The main range of the Crimean mountains, a great barrier reef in the way of the cold northern winds, gradually lowers and runs farther inland from the edge of the surf. The subtropical greenhouse climate of the southern coast, owing to the closeness of the mountains, is replaced by the chill of the winds that has come from the steppe behind the mountains to cool down the parched slate valleys. Fewer non-indigenous plants can be found here. Most of their evergreen gloss has been left behind in the parks and gardens of the central part of the southern coast. Everything here looks more natural, even aesthetic at times. The rolling plains with scant vegetation, groups of pine trees, and the vineyards. This is a landscape that wears no makeup. Suffice it to say, this combination of abundant sunshine and clay soils of the mountain slopes is very favorable for local wine growing. This is why most of the wine producers famous for their trademarks, such as Massandra, established their vineyards here. Prince Golitsin's definition of wine, being the very product of the area, is supported by the local wines of superb quality, made by the fertile valleys and skillful winemakers. Nectar Demergy, Prince Golitsin's seventh heaven, the famous Madeira of Solnichnogorsk, imperial port wines, Cocor de Zertny and I Cerez are some of the best examples on the long list of fine wines here. The land of Homer's hills are full of the poetry of wine, not words, very much like the threshold of heaven. With this lack of man-made comfort, other advantages can be found. Nature is not yet debased as on a typical resort holiday ground. Local beaches look better with the lack of concrete and hard steel of the water breaker. The sea is more healthy and profound. It cures for lots of chronic ailments. Thalassotherapy is what will make these beaches popular for your betterment, and the sunburn got on the beach can quickly be cured by a hike up the mountain's reach. Up Mount Capcula to the waterfall, the gorge itself is an unmatched spectacle. Even though the Jorjor Falls is no Niagara, its gentle coolness is good for the overheated tourista. However, the winding road is taking us now further eastwards, leaving behind the mysterious Karabi Yela Valley, the last one in the Crimean mountain range. The top of the mesa is soaring high upon the haze of the sleepy valley, as if held captive by eternity. As we move on, a cape topped with a half-ruined tower captures our attention. This is the well-known Chobon Jule, the Tower of Shepherds. It has been used by shepherds as a shelter in rainy weather for centuries untold. What are these remnants above so silent about? At least 5 centuries have gone by since the tower was built. We move on with our journey towards the mirror of the sea, the smell of iodine in the air, and the splash of the waves. Another milestone on our way is a popular resort, Morskoy, which can boast a long lineage too. Nowadays, though, most of its income is made up from the revenues of seafront hotels, retail trade, and winemaking. And here we are in Sudak now. Getting to know its picturesque outskirts shall be taken as an overture to the further encounter with this unusual city, with its epic and romantic history, full of riddles and mysteries. Let us climb up the Olinyi Pass, and then the ribbon of highway running among the juniper-grown hillsides that will take us to the site overlooking a grand view of the Kutlak Valley in the framework of the guardian mountain peaks. Mount Taraktash, Mount I-Georg, and Cape Meganom. The rest of the area is under vineyards. Sudak's winemaking traditions are inseparable from the city's heritage that originated in the early 3rd century BC, when Gothic princes founded a fortress on the coast. near beautiful fertile valleys, forest-grown mountains, and pure springs. This probably accounts for the city's original name of Sudag, which might mean water in the mountains or mountain spring. Later on, the city changed its names and its rulers many times. The Goths were replaced by the Byzantines, who named it Sudegya. Under this name, the city thrived as a center of trade. The Khazars, the Polotsi, the Kipchaks, and the Golden Horde Noyons, the noblemen, strove to seize control over it and imposed devastating taxes on the city. Russian princes also took interest in the Byzantine Sudayev, which was a tasty morsel both for merchants with their capital and for daring warriors in search of a town to sack. Its glory glared so bright that the Black Sea was then called the Sea of Saroj, or the Russian Sea, in Russian chronicles. In the 13th century, when the Crimean horde finally settled in Tauridia, the new historical name of Crimea appeared, and the remainder of the Byzantine coastal heritage, Sogdeia above all, was handed over to the new rulers from Italy. Those were first the Venetians, the Crusaders' allies, then the Genoese, allies of the Latin Empire, the fragment of what used to be the Byzantine Empire. This is how the Greek and Roman Sugdeia transformed into Soldaia, one of the best Genoese ports on the Mar di Negro coast. The fortified city, the Burga, was located relatively close to Kaffa, the city of Genoese influence in Crimea, and to Solkat, then capital of the Crimean horde, which facilitated its commercial and political growth. The city benefited most from transit trade, importing luxuries like jewelry from Italy, opium from Bengal, and ivory from Malabar. But the major item of export were the slaves. Male slaves were used for rowing boats and for working on rock piles. Females were used as servants, wet nurses, and concubines. Successful deals added to the city's fame. Even Marco Polo's trading company opened up one of its offices in Soldaia. Sudak's unique charm, apart from its fine wines, is what makes time feel real. Just imagine taking a regular bus to this provincial yet quite modern coastal town, staying overnight in an inexpensive and humble local hotel, and waking up in the morning with a feeling of having traveled back to the medieval ages because of the Genoese fortress walls near your window. The rectangular towers in the corners of the walls allowed for a flanking fire from crossbows and light mangonels. The design of the barbican ensured a double defense of the city gate. This city on top of the hill was impregnable for quite a while. Even if the stone circle of walls and towers was broken through, the citadel and the independent consular castle could continue defending themselves. Alas, no houses survived. Although it has been centuries since Turkey was in its prime, Soldaia and the Genoese ceased to exist because of the Turkish blades of the Yatagans and the fire of their warship cannons. The site was turned into ruins. First, it was the Turks and then the Russian soldiers from Kilarovsky's regiment, quartered nearby, that took stones from the ancient wall. This was continued by the Bavarian Germans who were settled here by order of Catherine II. Even so, as late as the 18th century, the sparks of the former glory of Saroz Sudaya Soldaya were so bright that the Empress initially planned to restore the city from ruins and make it the capital of the newly gained land of Turidia. This plan was not meant to be implemented, however, since the mountains that once served as a shield from the nomadic raids began to hinder the road building, and the bay that was used to house caravels appeared to be too shallow for such high-decked vessels as frigates and battleships. The pendulum of Sudak's history swung towards oblivion. Its revival did not begin again until the present time, bringing it back to the former status of a popular coastal resort. As it was centuries ago, this place is much spoken about. Its medieval fame transformed this image into a resort. Just like centuries ago, it is now crowded with visitors. Unique wines, along with their curing facilities, the very best service, superb beaches, impressive history, and beautiful scenery have all contributed to the revival of its historical image. But there's a lot more to it than just attractive sights within the city. Its picturesque outskirts added to its success. Sudak would be equally lost without its Genoese fortress and the Novi Sviet scenery. The name of this village, Novi Sviet, the original name of the village, by the way, was Paradise. The road to this little piece of heaven on earth is a miracle in itself. 6 kilometers of overture to Paradise feel like a TV commercial made live, a new image popping up with each bend of the road. For example, there's an image of one of the steep sides of Mount Kushkaya that runs right down to the side of the road, and from where a group of pines is headed for the top like a group of professional climbers. Think of a scorching hot summer day and of the parched rocks with no water or soil for them. However, the pine trees here still cling onto the prominent rocks with their mighty roots in an effort to reach for the sky. This is the essence of the local environment and of the curing power of local scenery. The strong sunshine flowing from the landscape is no less powerful than a course of radon baths, they say. Meeting Novi Sviet is extremely enjoyable for all the human senses. Isn't it a divine view, an emerald green bay framed by the spotted gray Kokoba Kaya rocks and lined with a yellow stripe of the beach? A handful of toy-looking houses hiding in the juniper lanes. The champagne of the air, the song of cicadas, and the breath of the sea breeze. The village houses several resort complexes that were made open for the public only recently. They were originally intended as a top comfort holiday escape for secret officials. The area's official status is that of a natural and botanical preserve. Nowadays, it is the time of recomposing the past. One such instance is the restoration of Golitsyn's Path, that had been built by the prince himself to make walks around Eden more comfortable. All of Novi Sviet's recent history is associated with the name of Lev Golitsyn. In fact, the name Novi Sviet was invented by the prince. This rhymed impromptu by Vladimir Gilarovsky is one of the many notes in the prince's guest book made in one of Russia's most beautiful places. Within these couple of days spent in the fabulous Novi Sviet, I came to see the world in a new light, and there's a new light sparkling in my soul, too. So let us take a walk along the shore of the pearly bays by Golitsyn's path to paradise. What we face first is a magnificent view of the green bay dominated by Mount Falcon, and some more distant peaks of Mount Fortress with Kez Kolul Tower on top, Capes Alchakkaya and Megonam. The land of Samaria lies someplace behind the last of the visible capes, covered with dry grass. Another site on our route is the stage grotto. In its coolness, we see the remaining fragments of the prince's ideas, the stage, and the niches of a wine collection. The bend of the path and the splash of the waves. Everything seems to be singing hosannas to the prince who established this special place for pleasure in paradise on earth. Another splendid view of the Paradise Collection is the rock overlooking Blue Bay and the long tail of Cape Kapchik. When Sudak was being named Slodaya, smugglers chose it as their secret place where they are believed to have loaded untaxed goods from visiting boats. This is how Blue Bay gained its other name, as the Bay of Pirates. As far as the quality of the water goes, competent people assure us that swimming in Blue Bay waters will give one an invigorating supply of mineral health that even Miami can't offer. This is one of the attributes of paradise. Each step up the path takes us higher and higher, and here we are on top of Cape Kapchik. The see-through grotto gives a divine view of the Tsar's Beach, the Blue Bay, and the Karul Obab rocks. Let us now walk back to Novi Sviet through the endemic plants of paradise, tall junipers with interpolations of Sudak stony pines. Walk back and say goodbye to the splendid scenery of paradise, the cradle of domestic champagne, for a dreamland with the unusual name of Samaria awaits us. Formally, this land does not exist on a map, yet it is quite real and located to the east of Eden. A real gray ribbon of Feodosia Highway leads us there. Just by the entrance to Samaria, Hidden between the mountain ridges, near Mount Ekidag, to the east of Cape Meganom, there is a valley basking in the sun. Formerly a pasture for goats, nowadays Cause Valley is one of the rare places in Crimea with genuine vines preserved. Local grapes are used to make such incredible wines as Cherny Doctor, for example. These wines are so unique that, unlike those of Massandra and Inkerman, they are known not for the name of the company, but for their brand names. Solnizhna Dolina, Sun Valley, the name of the village and the producer, or Arkadresa, named for the local famous wine cellars there. The crown of the King of Wines is claimed by many worthy candidates, but Cherny Doctor is one of the most dangerous rivals for them all. This dispute will be a lasting one, for this land and the small town of Koktebel, nearby the extinct volcano Karagdag, with lots of blue hills, is rich in wines, their flavor having absorbed the scorching heat of the slate valleys, the scent of local herbs, and the light touch of the fresh breezes from the sea. The palette of wines and cognacs of Koktebel has all the colors of the local scenery. In this remarkable place, Terenty Ivanovich Vyazemsky, a doctor and lecturer of Imperial Moscow University, established the Karagdag Research Center right on his estate. Currently, it is the Karagdag branch of the Southern Seas Biology Institute of the Ukrainian National Academy of Science, located in the Karagdag Wildlife Preserve. The preserve is a unique area with scenery of rare beauty and diversity, and home to over 3,000 species of plants, countless butterflies, and over 200 species of birds. But the main attraction is Mount Karagdag itself, a dream come true. Maximilian Volozhin gives a poetic explanation for the formation of this mountain from a violent volcano that was active 150 to 160 million years ago.
Здесь стык хребтов Кавказа и Балкан, и побережьем этих скудных стран великий пафос лирики завещан с первоначальных дней, когда вулкан метал огонь из недр глубинных трещин и дымный факел в небе потрясал. Сказ о Карадаге. Не выцветить ни кистью на бумаге, не высловить на скудном языке. Я много видел, дивом мироздания, картинами и словом отдал дань. Но грудь узка для этого дыхания, для этих слов тесна моя гортань. Заклепаны клокочущие пасти, в остывших недрах мрак и тишина, но спазмами и судорогой страсти здесь вся земля от века сведена.
What has remained the same for centuries is the stone group known as the Garden of Infidels, Gayur Bak, and the spring Gayur Sheshme, the rock figures of the king and queen, their court, the throne, and the symbol of Karagdag, a rock called Golden Gate. Isn't it a miracle that something beyond human imagination can exist unchanged for centuries? As we walk past the Black Mountain, this is how Karadag translates from Turkish, the entrance to Samaria in Koktebel opens wide. It is here, on these rolling plains burnt with the sun, where Voloshin discovered a new land and named it Samaria.
По складкам гор, по выгибам холмов, огонь древних недр и дождевая влага двойным лицом ваяли облик твой, и сих холмов однообразный строй и напряженный пафос Крадага. Сосредоточенность и теснота зубчатых скал, а рядом широта степных равнин и мреющие дали, стиху разбег, а мысли меру дали. Моей мечтой с тех пор напоены предгорья героические сны, и как Тыбеля каменная грива, его полынь хмельна моей тоской. Мой стих поет в волнах его прилива, и на скале, замкнувший зыбь залива, судьбой и ветрами изваян профиль мой.
The mind boggles at such a strange source of inspiration. The landscape is not at all breathtaking, nothing like Gurzov praised by Pushkin. Perhaps it's because the outcast tramps and poets have another idea of paradise that this place matches best. The poet of universal interest found his own natural temple and a theater that needs no actors, and expressed them in lapidary verses. By that time, he had left behind Paris, St. Petersburg, and a long trail of European experiences. His contacts included artists and famous scientists. An excellent sketcher and water painter, banished from the capitals, Maximilian, or Max as he was known by his close circle of friends, Voloshin, chose to retire to this desolate corner, where he later built the poet's home near the Cornelian beach, and in his studio he created what he called the land of Koktebel. During the years of the Revolution and the Civil War that followed, in the times of devastation and shaky peace, here in the poet's abode, they sought shelter, protection, and advice. Both a Red Army chief and a White Army officer, fanatic adherents of two intolerant faiths. The spirit of poetic attraction of the phantom land discovered by Max was so hard to resist that if we take at random one of 5 top artists or painters from Moscow or St. Petersburg of the time, he or she will inevitably have a connection to Koktebel and Voloshin's home. Tsvetaev sisters, Grinn, Postovsky, Mandelstam, Gumilyov, Ehrenberg. A list of dazzling bright names constituting what is known as the Silver Age of Russian poetry. At the same time, Max's abode in Koktebel was welcoming hundreds of guests. All those surveys, readings, walking trips, and sunbathing gave such a sense of freedom which the authorities could not allow. In the newly established state, there was no place reserved for a poet, manifestation of the nation's conscience. In his last verse, Voloshin bitterly admits that revolution destroys the best of the best, the most honest and holy ones, so that entangled in the web, they are discarded and sucked out. It has been over 60 years now since the poet founded his last shelter on top of Cape Kukchik Yanishar in Koktebel. For over 30 years, from the late 1920s to the early 1960s, his name was officially condemned. His poems remained unpublished, his articles never mentioned, and watercolors kept under locks. But let us dive into the hot summer again. Koktebel is a comfortable place not only for poets, it is also called the land of cognacs. The shore of Karadag Bay, was created for happiness and happy ones. The charm of this place is something to remember. As time goes by, you will suddenly feel like running along the pebbled beach, together with us all. The breeze from the bay and the wind from the plain will dip you into an ocean of nirvana if you take a bird's eye view of the place, hang gliding above, like Daedalus's son. Almost all of the world-famous Soviet pilots first trained here in Koktebel. Max Voloshin was one of the first to discover this phenomenon of airflows while walking on the side of Mount Uzhin-Sarit, accompanied by Ivan Ivazovsky's grandson, Kostya Artsulov, one of Russia's first ace pilots. Gliders began to fly above the valley later, when Max was no longer alive. The young Antonov, Ilyushin, and the ambitious Sergei Kirillov were among many pilots of light gliders who soared above Samaria, the land of the Silver Age, the land of silver wings. Feodosia. Feodosia. Many cities' fates are determined by their names. The proof of that is in a long list. But some cities' names are capable of changing the pace of time and the image of history. An old city that lies on the Samarian shore is called Feodosia, which translates as a gift from God. Its history dates back 2,500 years, when the descendants of Odysseus sailed to the barbarian land on the edge of Europe. The land that gave shelter to the Hellenes was what Voloshin later named Samaria. This polis was known to supply grain to Athens and act as an outpost against the hostile Scythian environment. The hot breath of the steppe that brought drought and crop failure and incessant raids of the belligerent tribes were what eventually destroyed the ancient polis. For many centuries here, as well as all throughout Europe, the chest of the earth and the marble plates resounded with the thud of horses' hooves. Weakened by the barbarian attacks, the god-given Feodosia began to turn into a ghostly shadow of the Bosporan kingdom in the early decades of the new era. An almost 1,000-year period of oblivion followed until the 13th century, when the ancient city began to revive much of itself, owing to Genoa's success. It was no longer an ancient Greek city of Feodosia, but the Genoese Kafka that thrived to become the main center of Mediterranean culture in the Crimea. The word Kaffa can be translated as head from local medieval dialects. This name perfectly matches the status of the major Genoese city on the Crimean coast. For 200 years, despite the growing Tartar influence, the first capital of the Crimean horde was only one day's horseback ride away, the Genoese Kafka successfully thrived. Even Tatar Khans were eager to become business partners of the wealthy Genoese merchants and their representatives in Crimea, Kafkan consuls. The city built strong walls and defensive towers around its periphery. Portions of this citadel still remain, 500 years after the city fell. The walls of ancient buildings are believed to preserve the spirit of the bygone past, which is especially felt in Feodosia. The ancient Greek colony had been replaced by the Genoese Kaffa, which in turn fell in 1475 to the Khan of Crimea, an ally of the Turks, who then transformed it into a Crimean vassal of the Ottoman Empire named Kefi. Looking at this city today, it's hard to imagine that this port used to be a strategic center for the east-west trade route, with the riches of the East flowing to Europe and those of Europe again going to Asia. We seem to have forgotten how vodka came to Russia, in the same way that the Dutch have forgotten how tulips found their way to Holland. Of course, it was through Feodosia. Annexation by Russia put an end to the medieval Renaissance town of Crimea. But the pendulum of time has swung back to prosperity. The air of Genoese Kafka still lingers in the city. The walls and the towers add to the blend of architectural styles, so characteristic of most coastal cities. Quite recently, about 100 or more years ago, Feodosian looks and lifestyle was more of an Italian provincial city rather than that of a remote area in the Russian Empire. The blissful tranquility of a small port clinging to the landfills of a once glorious historical past produced some outstanding examples of painting and literary arts. This timeless city cannot be mentioned without including Aivazovsky, Kuinji, Latry, Grinn, and many more names are still to be put on the list of Feodosia's admirers. The city really has a special atmosphere for fine creative arts. The rich oils of the Samarian canvases of Bogoyevsky and the dazzling bright colors of the Aivazovsky maritime paintings are sparkles that earned centuries-long fame to this small but everlasting town. It was the hometown of the artist when he returned from St. Petersburg, having gained worldwide fame and wealth. Aivazovsky gave a fountain as a gift to his hometown, and many other contributions as well to the revival of the past glory of Feodosia. Suffice it to say, the railway that was essential for the town's and port's development owes much to its financial aid of the maestro. Again, he was the one to define Feodosia's status as a free port. But his best gift to the city was the art gallery housing his masterpieces of maritime art. And even though experts say that the collection displays only some of the Grand Master's 6,000 canvases that had failed to sell, this is just another proof of genius in the local artist, whose heart beat in unison with the surf of Feodosia Bay. The artist was buried where he lived as a child, in a part of the town formerly inhabited by the Armenians, not far from St. Sargis Church. The epitaph on his tombstone reads, "Born mortal, he is now immortal." Adjacent to the gallery, but later in time, another artist lived who created his own imaginary romantic and ideal settings in Grinnland, which was a product of fantastic and whimsical dreams that lived in his worn-out soul. The author's name was Alexander Grinn. It is hard to believe, but sometimes he didn't even have money to buy the ink and paper to write down his tales and novels, which seems so inappropriate and strange in a new world being torn apart by revolutionary terror. Some of his most out-of-this-world works included Jesse and Morgiana, Runs Through the Waves, and The Golden Chain. They were all written here in this house, in a tiny apartment that the poor author rented. In fact, Grinn only lived in Feodosia for 2 years as a young man. The rest of his days he spent in Stary Krim, a settlement nearby, in a half-ruined hut he had bought with the money from a sold watch. The funeral for the author of Scarlet Sails is something that should not be brought up at all. Anyway, time always puts things right, and his memory is still alive. Grinn's grave is decorated with the statue of a girl running across the waves. The life of Feodosia is symbolically depicted by its emblem of Mercury's rod entwined with Asclepius's snake, thus showing that the city specializes in trade and medicine. Throughout the centuries, ship freight and cargo changed endlessly, but the tradition of commerce is still alive since ancient times. The Feodosian trading port is not only a major contributor to the city budget, but also an incentive for local economic development. The other aspect is represented by genuine treatment methods and resort infrastructure, which in addition to the resort facilities common all along the coast, includes spa springs with the same healing value as some of those in the Caucasus. Muds found in Ajigol are incredibly effective too. Taking into account the price, which is very reasonable, Feodosia's advantages are obvious, which is proved by its city beaches and streets crowded in the high tourist season. This place attracts the admirers of Samaria, as well as spa patients and travelers. This is part of everyday life in the city that emerged 2,000 years ago as a gift of the ancient deities. The city of Kerch is easily accessible from Feodosia, 100 kilometers across the rolling plains to the crescent of barrows called Uz-Oba, welcoming visitors to Kerch Penkatium. A sacred land of one's imagination. This is where Pallades argued with Atrides, son of Atreus, and where Mithridates stabbed himself to death. Kerch is truly a patriarch to the ancient Taridia. with a contribution that can't be easily estimated. The press of centuries is heavier here than anywhere else, and the relics of the past are so valuable that the whole city should have been admitted to a museum. The glory of Kerch is also supported by many of its fallen heroes. The citadel Yeni Kale was erected in 1703 by the Turks on the narrowest part of the strait, to the east of Kerch, on the way to the passage. Its third tier is decorated by some turrets, built in the Turkish style and probably intended to withstand cannonballs with their domes, whereas their mighty guns easily reached the ships in the strait. To the south of Kerch, another citadel has been remodeled to welcome excursion goers. Designed by the engineer Toltoben, hero of the first defense of Sevastopol, the citadel is cut in the earth and represents another stage in the art of military engineering. During the Russo-Turkish War of 1877 to 1878, Kerch was ready to participate in action, but the enemy was reluctant to test the power of its 11-inch cannons. Kerch fortifications had been the only stronghold of Russia in the Black Sea region until the Black Sea Naval Fleet and Sevastopol were restored, and thus Kerch attracted the attention of Emperor Alexander II. What does Kerch keep in memory? The water turning red with blood, the terror of death sneaking like a snake in the Adjimushkai rock pile, Eltigen, the bastion of the glory of the Marines, and the heroic Totolben, the fort that earns its glory during the defense. All this is just a cut of the centuries-long history of Kerch. This remote corner of the Akumena was once believed to be the frontier of the inhabited world. The Kerch Strait used to be named the Cimmerian Oxford, Borpolis. Amid the savage barbarian steppes, a beautiful city called Pantocrator once came to life. Yes, it is invisible as a city, but has entered the register of time forever. Mithridates Hill is the emblem of Kerch, its sacred and everlasting Pantheon. The top of the hill reveals a view of what existed here and now, and that is eternity itself. Walking along the streets of Kerch, it's easy to get lost in time. An ancient church that goes back to the Byzantine times is standing in modern surroundings. The gray and solemn Barrow Malik Chesmi, and the hustle of a busy bus station. Evidence of the Turkish domination, the ruined Yeni Kale, the fishing port, looks like an integral part of the modern set. This is what the city is like, one of the most picturesque illustrations of the spirit of the Samaria. About 1,000 years ago, the bed of the Sivash and the Sea of Azov sunk down, leaving a long chain of minor islets which gradually merged together to form 110-kilometer-long sandbar separating Sevesh from the Sea of Azov, the Arabeth Split. Let us set off now to travel along the Samarian coast. The Azov becomes replaced by the Chersonese. The splendor of Crimean steppes will blend into the sky. Among the sandy hills, on our way to the Arabeth Split, we will meet the mighty walls with embrasures. This is the Arabeth Stronghold. In fact, there had existed a stronghold here in the time of the Bosporan Kingdom in the 4th and 5th centuries BC, but several centuries later, a new one was erected and named Arabeth, which translates from Turkish as the suburbs. The surviving 3-meter thick walls have a ditch and a high bank front. The Crimean part of the Sea of Azov. Seagulls are flying over. Empty beaches smell fresh salt, not a high season. No one could find a better place for saying goodbye. Anything will pass by, but you and eternity will stay together forever. We are glad to promise you a new upcoming series of enchanting videos in the near future. And we don't say goodbye, we say see you. See you soon, Crimea.